AI increases the uncertainty and the unpredictability of digital product management because all of a sudden, right, we're putting a lot of faith into the promise of AI generated predictions and insight. Hey folks, my name is Jeff Gotthelf. I've worked as a designer, as a product manager, as a team leader, and an entrepreneur. These days, I work as a coach and an author and a consultant. I've written a few books on the topic of customer centricity, product management, and design. One book was called Lean UX, another called Sense and Respond, and most recently, a book on objectives and key results called Who Does What by How Much. In this video series, I've collated all of that information with the focal point being how to stay customer-centric in all of your work. We take a variety of different angles at product development that put the customer at the center of every conversation. How do we make sure that we're designing the right thing? How do we set customer-centric goals? How do we build organizations that reward focusing on the customer? And then ultimately, how do we make sure that no matter what technology is thrown at us, we're always solving real needs for real people in a meaningful way? I think you'll learn a lot, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's talk about lean product management and what it is and the difference that it makes in building digital products and services. In 2011, Marc Andreessen famously said, "Software is eating the world." And you could argue that since 2011, software has actually eaten the world. Every business of scale, every business that aspires to scale is a software-based business. We run the entirety of our companies on software platforms and foundations. Now, what's interesting is that since then, AI has begun to eat software as well. So on top of understanding how to run our companies and our products and services on these digital platforms, we now have to build in artificial intelligence features on top of the software as well. And so it's important to consider, right, regardless of what industry you work in, regardless of what types of products and services you build, it's important to remember that you are in the software business, right? If you make products for the insurance industry or for financial services or for retail, those products and services ultimately run on software. So it's important to think that we build for the software business. Now, what's interesting is that the nature of software has fundamentally changed in the last 10 to 15 years. When I started working professionally, software came in a box. You went to the store and you literally bought a box of software. These days, that seems ridiculous, right? You don't go to the store and buy a box of TikTok or a box of Instagram, right? Software just shows up in apps and in browsers and in all kinds of digital formats. And so what that means is that the nature of the products that we build our companies on top of has changed, right? When software came in a box, software was static. It ended. You would work for a while, you would produce some software, you would then print that software onto disks and then ship those disks in boxes to stores. Today, software is continuous. We build these continuous systems that never end, right? We can work on these systems forever, right? If you want to think about it, right? Like, when is Google done, right? When is Netflix done? When is Amazon done? These companies are never done, right? We can build our systems and update and optimize them and improve them forever. And that fundamentally changes how we think about the way that we build these digital products and services. The group executive chairman of BBVA Bank, Francisco Gonzalez, had this amazing quote where he said, "We're witnessing the emergence of big data technology. The Internet of Things is taking off, and artificial intelligence is still in the early stage." It's no longer in the early stage, but it's there, right? "We are therefore competing in a race that has no finish line or predetermined route." That's the key phrase here. We're competing in a race that has no finish line, right? When software was static, software ended, there was a finish line. We stopped working on it and we started working on something else. But because we build these continuous systems today, Software never ends. There is no finish line. We can work on these products and services forever, really. And since there is no finish line, he says there's no predetermined route about where we're going. Again, when software ended, there was a clear roadmap that said, we're done here. We've built all the features, and now we can move on to the next thing. When we optimize continuous systems, there's no predetermined route about where we're going, what we're going to do next, what we'll need to do next to keep the system active and useful and usable, as well as supporting the business. And so all of a sudden, we have to look for what people are doing in the system. We have to look for what the market is doing, how technology is changing, and then update the systems in accordance with what's happening in the real world, right? The evolution of our digital products and services emerge from the use of those systems and from the progress that the world makes around it, which again makes digital product development that much more difficult and product management more difficult. Now look, in 2015, I set out to do some research to understand how quickly software can be produced. In 2015, Amazon was shipping code to production. In other words, they were taking software and putting it in the hands of their customers every 11.6 seconds. That's incredible, right? 5 times a minute, Amazon was putting some small change in the code in the hands of their customers, and that gave them the opportunity to learn how well that change was meeting the needs of those customers. Today, Amazon ships code to production into the hands of their customers every single second. 60 times a minute, some Amazon customer somewhere in the world experiences a change to the system. Now, these aren't huge changes, right? These are small changes. Maybe we take a button and we move it to the right a few pixels, right? Maybe we tweak the search algorithm. But then Amazon has the opportunity to learn whether or not that change made a meaningful difference in the user experience of that customer. And if it did, they can take that change and they can scale it to more and more customers to see if it lives up to those early findings or not. 60 times a minute, Amazon has a learning opportunity. Now, what's interesting is that using that same exact technology, we also run the risk of simply manufacturing more software faster. So rather than using each one of those deployments, right, once a second, once a minute, once an hour, once a day, once a week, it doesn't really matter, right? As fast as we want to deploy software, we can do it today, right? Amazon is just the extreme case. But every one of those opportunities is potentially a learning opportunity. But it's also an opportunity to simply produce software and not to find out whether or not you actually delivered value with that software. And so we run the risk of continuing to operate like a software factory, just making more code and more code and more code and more features, right? The reality is this: more code does not equal more value to your customers, right? It actually only equals 2 specific things. It equals more code and more technical debt. That's it, right? The deployment of software, the shipping of features into market is no longer a measure of success because we can simply do it as often as we want, right? That's not a thing that we're going to celebrate, especially if we're shipping every second, every minute, every day, every hour. And so we have to change our definition of success and our definition of done and really move away from this idea that just because we can build it, we should build it. We have to understand whether or not it's actually making money for the company, it's meeting the needs of the customer, it's adding value to the user experience. There's a great case study from 2014 when Jeff Bezos stood on stage very proudly and unveiled the Amazon Fire Phone. The company had worked for 4 years doing research and development, product design and development to launch a competitor to the iPhone. Bezos stood on stage very proud, held the phone up in his hand. Everybody went crazy. They thought it was amazing, and nobody bought the phone. Nobody, right? Amazon lost $170 million in unsold inventory over the Fire Phone. They spent 4 years of research and development time only to find out that nobody wanted this particular product. 1,000 people worked on that team. A couple of years later, Bezos was interviewed in Fast Company, and he was asked why, right? Why did you build this? And people on his team were also asked, why? Why did you build this product that obviously nobody wanted? And the people on the team said something interesting. They said, we built this product because Bezos wanted it. That was it, right? Now, look, you can't blame the people on the Fire Phone team for doing what Bezos wanted. He was already very, very successful. He had built the biggest e-commerce store in the world. He was building cloud platforms and web services and drone delivery and reusable rockets, right? All these amazing projects were happening. And so if he came to you and he said, look, we're going to build a competitor to the iPhone, you said, absolutely, I want to be on this project, right? But past success does not indicate future success. Just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work now, right? So just because somebody wants to build something doesn't mean that that thing actually has value, right? And Bezos himself, he said, look, yeah, that was a failure, right? But we're a big company and we need to fail big, right? We're going to learn from that failure and we're going to come back stronger and bigger and more successful. Now, I agree with that philosophy. We want to learn from our failures and become better the next time we try something. But I disagree with the fact that you have to spend 4 years and 1,000 people's time to find out that nobody actually wanted the product that you're building. There has to be a better way to learn that. There is a better way, and that's where lean product management comes in, right? The idea behind lean product management is that we are going to build a continuous conversation with the people that we serve, the customers who consume the products and services that we make. And the technology that we have today, that ability to ship product into the market over and over again as quickly as we want, is exactly the same technology that we're going to use to build that continuous conversation with our customers and our users. The first step in that conversation is ship. In other words, we want to put something into the world, something into the hands of our customers. Now, that could be a feature, it could be a service, it could be a prototype, it could be an idea, but it's the smallest thing that we can make to test our idea. We want to ship that into the hands of our customers. The next thing we want to do is sense, right? How does that thing, that small thing that we put into the hands of our customers, how does it affect the behavior of those customers? Right? What are they doing differently now that we've provided them with this thing, right? And are they doing something more successfully, less successfully? Are they doing nothing at all? And then the third step in this learning loop, in this continuous conversation, is respond, right? So we've got ship, sense, and respond. Once we've collected this information, what are we going to do about it? Right? And what we've built here is this learning loop. This continuous conversation is this learning loop, this idea that we put something into the world, we see how it affects customer behavior, and then we respond to that learning by shipping the next iteration of the idea, right? And the goal, our goal, is to get through this loop as quickly as possible. Because every time we get through this loop, ideally, we're learning something, which means that every time we've learned something, we can course correct towards a better version of our idea. And the faster that we get through this loop, the less time, the less effort, the less money, the fewer resources that we spend on that idea. And so if we find out that we're wrong, it's a lot easier to change course. It simply hurts less, right? I used to work with a client who was shipping new features to their customers once a year. That means they got to learn from their customers once every 12 months. If they were wrong every 12 months, right, the cost of that was painful because they spent a year building that stuff. When they started shipping product once every quarter, right, now they had 4 opportunities to learn. And the level of effort that they spent on each one of those deployments was 1 quarter. It was 3 months, right? That's a lot less. Still kind of painful, but a lot less painful than a year. And so our goal is to reduce that learning loop to as fast as possible, whatever is reasonable within your context. Now, I talked about 3 parts of this continuous conversation. We talked about shipping, sensing, and responding. Shipping continuously to market is an effort of will and investment from your company. The company has to want to put ideas into market quickly, and they have to invest in the technology that allows that. Sensing is the same thing. We have to want to learn. We have to invest in analytics and reporting and user research and customer feedback to understand what customers are doing and why they're doing that. So we can invest, we can put money into that and get those 2 components of the learning loop in place. When it comes to responding, that's a cultural shift. We have to make sure that when we do put things into the hands of our customers and we do learn whether or not it worked well for them, we can actually implement those findings in our organization. And this is a tough one because inevitably we're going to find out that some of our ideas didn't work. Some of our ideas were wrong. And so if we learn that, we have to feel comfortable inside the organization to come back to our leaders, to our stakeholders, to our clients and say, look, I know we loved this idea, but everything we've put out into the hands of our customers is coming back and saying, this is not the way to do this. And so we have to build the psychological safety that allows people to comfortably raise their hand and say, we have to change course. And I have the evidence to prove it. Right? So that's our learning loop, shipping, sensing, and responding. Now look, time scale for this learning loop is relative. Our goal is simply to learn faster than we are today. Right? So again, if it takes you a year to learn something today, if you can start learning every quarter, you're now learning 4 times faster. And if you can cut that in half, right, all of a sudden we're learning 8 times a year. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to simply start to learn faster. Every time we learn something, we can adjust course and make sure that we're actually delivering a product that meets the needs of our customers. The mindset shift here is to move away from this mindset of works as designed to a mindset of continuous improvement, right? There is always an opportunity to make the system better. There's always an opportunity to learn what our customers are doing to move forward, right? And the idea is to embrace this continuous change. Now, there have been situations in the past where the continuous change didn't make sense, right? In the manufacturing world, right, there wasn't a lot of change. In fact, manufacturing thrived on predictability, right? For example, let's say you're manufacturing cars, right? That's a high certainty, low risk situation, right? In that situation, you know exactly what you're building. You know all the materials that are going into it. You know what it's going to look like when it's done, and you have a pretty good idea of what people are going to do with that car once you've manufactured it. So your job is to produce as many cars at the lowest possible cost and to optimize that production process, because there isn't any variability, there isn't any uncertainty in that production process. But we don't work in that production process. We're working in a world of uncertainties, and we're working in a world of continuous change. And so in a lot of ways, we have to keep listening and paying attention to what's happening in the marketplace and reacting to those changes in real time. Because we end up taking unnecessary risk when we try to predict customer behavior, when we try to predict exactly what we're building or how it needs to be built, right? For the longest time, and certainly in my career, I've seen organization after organization, company after company, team after team, simply try to predict exactly what to build, what it will look like, how it will work, who it will serve, and the return on that investment. And the reality is that every single one of those companies has been wrong to one extent or another, right? Some have failed, certainly, some have been a little bit wrong, but this idea of simply trying to predict what people will do doesn't make sense anymore in a world of continuous change and in a world of uncertainty. Now, we've got a new component in the last few years that's making this even more difficult, and that is AI. AI increases the uncertainty and the unpredictability of digital product management, because all of a sudden, right, we're putting a lot of faith into the promise of AI generated predictions and insight. There are so many tools out there that are now telling you that you can do your job faster and in a more efficient way, and that you'll be more productive. But you're putting your trust into these systems, and we have evidence to show that the output from these systems isn't 100% true, that they hallucinate many times, and that they don't necessarily lead you down the right path. Sure, AI tools are going to help you get from zero or a blank screen to something faster, but outsourcing your entire product management process to AI-driven tools is highly risky, right? Because you as the human need to be there to assess what the output is and see if it makes sense. And you as the human need to be able to feed back into the system what you're hearing from other customers, right? AI is never going to be a substitute for generating insights from humans and then translating that into changes in the product that serve those humans. Now, the other aspect that makes AI challenging is that your bosses are inevitably asking you to add AI into their products, right? How do we add these AI features into the product, right? Because now that's all the rage. Let's make sure that we get that in there as well. Tremendous potential with AI tools, right? But the bottom line to remember here is that AI is a feature. Like any other feature in your product, it is best used to solve a user need. And if it's solving a user need in a meaningful way, terrific, let's do that. But it should go through the same vetting process, the same validation process, the same learning loop, ship, sense, and respond as any other feature we consider building. Because if it's not adding value, then we shouldn't introduce AI into the product just because someone thinks it's cool and we should do it. And we've seen this again and again and again. We're still making these mistakes. There was a product called the Humane AI pin that was supposed to revolutionize how we interact with devices. It was a wearable pin you put here on your shirt, and the idea was that you would talk to it, it had a little projector, and it would answer specific questions for you. And as people began to use it, the voice commands were very slow to respond, the battery life was awful on this thing, and the projector that came off of this pin that you wore on your shirt didn't work in many lighting conditions. Reviewers hated it, thought it was the worst thing they'd ever seen. And then, oh, by the way, the thing actually caught on fire occasionally. So you would wear this pin on your shirt and it would start to burn right on your shirt. And the other thing that caught on fire in the production of the Humane AI pin was the $230 million in venture capital that they raised, right? And when the founders were confronted with this idea, why didn't you test it? Why didn't you try different lighting conditions? Why didn't you check the battery life? They said, look, we knew exactly what to build. We knew what it should do. We didn't need to test it. We didn't need to prove it with customers. And that device is now dead on arrival. Right? We're still making these mistakes simply because the technology is cool. And there will be cooler technology in the future. So always keeping in mind that ship, sense, and respond loop, learning whether or not we're delivering value and adjusting course as we move forward. Now look, all of this is to say is that digital product development, design, and product management is complex and it's unpredictable. Right? Again, we just don't know exactly how things will shape up and what people will do with these tools. And we have a variety of systems and methods and ways of working and philosophies that help us de-risk the production of these digital products and services. We've got Agile, for example. We've got Lean Startup. We have product management, user experience and design thinking, and Lean UX. All of these methods are designed to help us build compelling products and services by reducing risk. But at the end of the day, these are just frameworks. They are starting points for the way that we work. They're not a recipe for us to follow blindly and hope that they deliver exactly what they say at the end. In fact, the foundational principle that we want to focus on is evidence-based decision making, right? We're going to build this learning loop, and every time that we collect evidence, we're going to use that evidence to justify maintaining course, changing course, right, pivoting, or killing the idea, right? That's the goal. And whatever system you put into place should be designed to help you learn quickly and adjust course based on that learning. That's at the core of lean product management. The other bit at the core is that we want to work from a user-centered or a customer-centered perspective. And to do that, the things that we're looking for, especially during the sensing part of shipping, sensing, as responding, is an outcome. An outcome is a measurable change in customer behavior that drives business results, right? Outcomes, these changes in human behavior, tell us when we've delivered customer value, right? What are people doing differently now that we've put this into their hands? And the other thing about outcomes is they help us determine when we're done, right? In a static world, we were done when we built all the features. In a continuous world where we build these systems that go on forever, we're done when we've changed human behavior enough. That's the goal. And we decide what enough is. But the goal is to measure that human behavior and make decisions based on that. Now, there's a challenge here. And the challenge is that it's really difficult to predict human behavior, right? We don't know exactly what people are going to do. And even if we figure it out, right? Even if we figure out exactly what folks are going to do, that behavior isn't static. It changes over time, and it emerges through the use of our products and services, right? What people were doing with Facebook when it first came out versus what they're doing with it today is fundamentally different. And even if we do a great job building features for people, features that we think are totally obvious, right? There's absolutely no way people will misunderstand how to use this particular feature or what to do in this particular situation. There's always a chance that we're going to be wrong, right? Just because we created the output or the feature, right, or the service, the campaign, or the policy, doesn't mean that we're going to get the outcome, the behavior change that we're looking for. And it's not the output that matters anymore, it's the outcome, it's the behavior change, because that's the world that we live in these continuous systems, right? What we're ultimately trying to do is we're trying to change the behavior of people by solving their problem. Right? So it's moving away from a question of did you make something or did you build it, and moving towards the question of so what? Right? So what? You built the thing. Did anybody actually use the thing? Was anybody looking for it in the first place? Did they use it again? Are they going to pay us money for it? Are they going to tell their friends about it? And if you're truly adhering to a lean product management methodology, we want to minimize the output. We want to create the least amount of code and software that we have to maintain, because remember, continuous systems, right? We have to maintain that stuff forever. So we're going to minimize the output that we want to create and maximize the outcome, the behavior change that comes from that. All of this is about reducing waste by not building things that people don't want. That's the key. And the process that we are going to go through, right, again and again and again, is we're going to define the business problem that we want to solve for. We're going to state our desired outcomes. Right? What does success look like? What will people be doing differently when we solve the problem? We'll declare our assumptions. Here's what we believe to be true in order to solve the problem and achieve the outcomes. We'll write hypotheses with those assumptions. And then we're going to run a series of experiments, those learning loops, synthesize our findings, and make those decisions. Are we going to persevere with our idea? Are we going to pivot? Or are we going to kill that idea? And we're going to keep going through that learning cycle. And that is the core of lean product management.